Usually the watercolor paper we see in our store comes in hot pressed, cold pressed, and rough. Let's talk about how to pick your perfect one, specifically for anime paintings. The main difference between the three types of paper is surface texture. So they can be translated to smooth, slightly textured, and rough. Cold pressed paper is most beginner friendly, but if you want to paint anime characters, hot pressed paper is a good option as well. For rough paper, let's leave it for now to keep it simple. If you try cold pressed paper and really like it, rough paper will be something you definitely want to try in the future. So between hot pressed paper and cold pressed paper, let's answer a few questions together to see which one works better for you. Number 1. Do you want to outline your painting with a fine liner? If your answer is yes, then hot pressed paper is clearly the better choice for you. Hot pressed paper is made by pressing the pulp between two hot metal rollers, hence the name hot pressed. So the surface is super smooth with barely any texture, and it's very easy to create continuous and precise lines using the fine liner. You'll be very happy with the results if you prefer the look of a really clean and defined illustration. If you want to outline, but think the fine liner look too harsh to you, color pencils also work well. It feels very smooth to draw on hot pressed paper, and it creates a softer look, especially when you pair with pastel watercolors. On the other hand, for cold pressed paper, pulp is pressed between cold metal rollers, and this creates some tooth on the paper surface. This allows the paper to absorb water faster, but will make your fine liner skip and give you broken lines. Also, your fine liner will dry faster and gets damaged. After drawing on cold pressed paper for a while, the ink on my pen doesn't flow very well anymore. If you use color pencil, the slight texture on cold pressed paper will exaggerate the soft look of a pencil line, and the lines will look diffused, so the whole picture looks a little bit fuzzy. But it's an interesting look, and it could pair well with some pastel color for a very cute illustration, without too much details, of course. Lastly, if you don't want to have any outline at all, both hot pressed paper and cold pressed paper will work well. You can just make a light pencil sketch and cover the sketch when you paint. Question number 2. Do you like a lot of details or loose painting? If you like a lot of well-defined details in your painting and don't want to make it too big, then hot pressed paper is your best friend. On the smooth surface, you can draw a lot of details with fine liner, and using a small brush, it glides on the paper effortlessly so you can paint all the details you want. You can blend the edges really well and create a seamless transition. And where you need a defined shape, the edges are sharply defined by the fine liner so you can paint the shapes accurately, and you can see what everything is very clearly. The details will look especially amazing if you're patient and work on a small area at a time. On the other hand, if you prefer a looser painting or making larger paintings, then cold pressed paper will be easier for you. To cover a larger area, you will need to put down more paint with more water. If you don't care about going outside of the pencil sketch and have a less defined look, you can get great results easier on cold pressed paper. Using the slight texture, you can move around your brush more freely to create those painterly strokes and make those beautiful brush marks. Here's a comparison of painting a larger area on dry paper. It's easier to leave hard edges on hot pressed paper if you're not careful enough, but the rougher texture on cold pressed paper make it more forgiving, and the texture helps to conceal the hard edges as well. Question number 3. Do you like smooth or texture? If you want everything to look super smooth and perfect, like a digital painting, then hot pressed paper will be a better choice. If you like textures like I do, go with cold pressed paper. On cold pressed paper, although the edges are less defined, the textures makes the painting very interesting, even if you have a large area with same color. Here is a comparison of making dry brush effect. It's much easier on cold pressed paper. Another fun thing to play with on cold pressed paper is the granulation effect. Because the texture allows the pigment to sink at different places, this can create very interesting and pretty patterns. Hopefully by now you have a good idea of which paper works better for you. If you don't, I got a bonus question for you. Do you want to make it easier for yourself? Then hands down cold press paper. If you're new to watercolor painting or you don't have a clear preference of the 3 questions we discussed, just try cold press paper first. As you paint more, you will develop a preference and you can easily try other types of paper. Of course, there's many other factors to consider because watercolor paper comes in many different material at different thickness and very different price points. But if you're just starting, choose the best paper you can comfortably afford. The key word here is comfortably, so that you're not worried about saving them. Once you get more practice and you're more familiar with the watercolor material, try better paper, maybe those made with 100% cotton, and then you can really appreciate the difference. Let me know if you're interested in more paper topics so we can elaborate more in future videos. If you're also deciding on which brush to get, check out my review of my favorite brush here.